Anything else? All right. So if you are a visitor here, thank you for coming today. And if you would like to come off mute or introduce yourself, we'll give you the opportunity just as you would feel comfortable. All right. Okay. All right, then I'm going to slide forward and hand this over to our sermon givers today. So, Susan, if you guys want to come off, I'll advance forward as you let me know.
Okay, sounds good.
And I'm going to have to hit. So if you've got multi things here, I'm going to have to get a little creative. So bear with me 1 second while I do this. All right, whenever you're ready.
Okay. So just to introduce myself for those who don't know me, is my sound okay?
Sound good.
So thumbs up, good.
Yes.
I'm Susan Jackson, and I have been a member at Harmony for, I think, 5 years. It's coming up on 5 years. Seems like forever. And I have been wanting to talk about this topic for a while, but I guess I just wanted to wait and see if it really stuck in my habit and practice before I talked about it, because I tend to be one of those people that I get really excited about something and I dive really into it, and then I don't always stick with it. But fasting, I have really gotten into it and stuck with it for quite a while, almost a year. So I feel like I've learned a lot and experienced a lot, and I want to share that with the Harmony community and see if that's something that might be interesting to you. And I will talk about, if you want to go to the next slide, Rob, and then the next, the kind of the story of how I first got into fasting. So this is not a picture of me. This is a picture of one of my best friends, Karen. And the reason that I'm showing this is because she is kind of the catalyst person that helped introduce me to fasting and helped me kind of get into this whole world. And I'll kind of back up. So about a year ago, in June, I had a doctor's appointment, the annual kind of go to the doctor, get on the scale, get your blood pressure, all that. And every year, for many years, we would have the same conversation. So what are we going to do about your weight? And it was always like, well, I'm going to try to go to Weight Watchers, or I'm going to try to cut back on things. I'm going to exercise more, just the same blah, blah that every year. And this year I thought, well, I think I have a new idea. I have this friend that she just had bariatric surgery. Maybe I should do that. And he says, yes, you should do that. You absolutely are a great candidate for that. He got so excited, his eyes lit up. And I was kind of taken aback because I kind of thought that I would say that. And then he would say, you don't need bariatric surgery. You're not that fat. But no, he totally was like, I'm ready to write you a recommendation. Let's go. And then he explained why. He wasn't just like, oh, fat is bad. He was explaining, that at my weight category or whatever, BMI, that he doesn't have a lot of patients that are in their 60s or beyond at that weight because they're dead, is kind of how he put it. I mean, he was pretty blunt. He said, if you're at this weight now and you continue on the path that you're on, you're probably not going to make it past your maybe mid 60s. And for me, that was a big wake up call because people in my family usually live a long time. Like I have a lot of family members who have lived into their late 90s. So to me, that's like saying, oh, you're going to chop about 30 years off of your life expectancy if you don't do something about this. So I left that doctor's appointment thinking I'm going to have to get bariatric surgery. I had my recommendation or my referral letter. I called the place to get an appointment. And then just that weekend, I had coffee that I do like a regular coffee with my friend Karen. And for some reason, I just noticed, and if you want to go to the next slide, Rob, I noticed that my friend of all these many years looked so slim. Now, I had seen her in the previous months, but I guess I just didn't really notice, because you know how with people that you're really close to, you don't always notice kind of how they look because you're just looking at them in their soul, right? But I don't know. I just noticed. I was like, dang, lady, you are looking good. And I knew that she had dealt with weight issues up and down too. You know, we both dealt with it. So I was like, what's going on here? And so she starts telling me about that she's been doing intermittent fasting. And I said, oh yeah, I've heard about that. And I dabbled in it a little bit, but oh my God, I was so hungry. And there's no way I could ever do that. That just did not work for me. And she's like, well, you know, there's also some other things you can try to help with what you eat. And she starts talking about kind of her low carb approach to eating, and that helped with the fasting. And she just starts to tell me about it. And I don't know, by the end of that coffee, I was really motivated. And I was like, I'm going to try this fasting. And Karen's like, you do it. Just do it. I'm leaving on a trip. I'm going to be gone for like a week and a half. But while I'm not gone, you start doing this and see how it goes. So go to the next slide. And then the next. So this picture is me last June at my parents' 50th wedding anniversary. We had a lovely party and a photo shoot. And this kind of captured what I looked like about that time that I had that doctor's appointment. And if you go to the next picture, this is me a couple weeks ago on our 18th wedding anniversary, putting on my wedding dress that I have not worn since 2002 and have not been able to fit in for many years. And I was able to fit in it. And actually, I thought it fit even a little bit better than when I was, 25. And so obviously my interaction with my doctor, followed by my coffee with Karen, really helped me get into this fasting business, become a zealot for it. And by the way, I did meet with that bariatric surgeon, but it was by that time I had already lost, I think, maybe 20 pounds from fasting and low carb eating. So I kind of just went for recon, just to kind of see what it was all about, to know, like, here's what you're up against. If you don't stick with this fasting, here's what you're going to go through. And I got the book and I got all the information, and I'm like, okay, I'm really glad to know about this. And I'm glad that this is an option, but I really want to try this fasting and see if it works. If you go to the next slide, I just have one more before and after picture. This is a very unflattering picture my husband took. We went zip lining at those underground caves in Louisville. And then go to the next one. And this is a selfie that I took a few weeks ago in my backyard. So just another visual example of how I have my journey visually in the past few months. So if you want to go to the next slide, I want to start by just talking about kind of some of the definitions. So what is fasting? What is not? Technically, it just means you're going for a period of time where you are purposely not eating. It's pretty simple. And actually, every one of you in this watching this service is a regular faster, whether you know it or not, because unless you're eating while you sleep, you're fasting, between the last time you eat in the day and until the next day when you eat for the first time. So that's technically is fasting. You also might have been familiar with it for a blood test. If you've ever had to have a colonoscopy or other procedures, there are times when you have to go a certain period of time purposely without eating. So that's really what fasting is. There are sometimes you'll hear about fasting as more of like it's an abstinence kind of fasting where you're not eating meat or you're not eating a specific thing. There's also dry fasting, and that's just where you have absolutely no food or drink of any kind, including water, which I'm drinking right now, to demonstrate that I am not doing dry fasting. But that is a type of fasting, and I just wanted to mention it. And then one other thing I wanted to mention is that fasting is not starving. Starvation, the word starvation means you are not purposely choosing to not eat. Okay, you're not able to eat, and it's not your choice or your fault, and it's a long period of time. So that's kind of what the difference is. And I just say that because a lot of times people will say like, oh, you're starving yourself. Like, how could you do that? I could never starve myself. Or you're putting yourself in starvation mode and your body's going to shut down. No, it's a totally different thing that I'm talking about. And speaking of which, there's just a few myths about fasting that I wanted to just bring up quickly, and then I'll dispel them. There's a myth that a lot of us, I'd say probably majority of Americans, believe that breakfast is the most important meal of the day, and that if you don't eat breakfast, if you skip breakfast, that's going to really screw up your metabolism. It's going to make you gain weight, that you've got to eat breakfast. Well, that is actually not true. There's no studies that show that eating breakfast has any relation to your weight, either loss or gain. So there's really no need to eat breakfast, just saying. There's also, and this is common, I've seen this in a lot of diets, and I've done a lot of diets, where eating lots of small, frequent meals will help you not be as hungry. And actually, it's actually the opposite. Eating a lot of small meals actually continues to kind of feed your hunger engine and makes you want to eat more frequently. And so the way I say it is, the more you eat, the more you want to eat. And if you've ever had like a day where you just kind of grazed all day, you know what I mean. It's like you ate something and then you're like, I kind of want something else. But if you go a period of time without eating, you actually are less hungry, which is kind of an interesting myth. People think that your brain needs a regular supply of dietary glucose, so that meaning like glucose from sugar, from carbs that you're eating. And that's not the case. Your body is very capable of producing whatever glucose it needs to keep your brain running, no matter what you're eating or if you're eating at all. The starvation thing, just to back to that for a second, people say, oh, your body's going to go into starvation mode if you go any period of time without eating. But actually, your metabolism increases when you fast up to 48 hours. Now, if you went beyond 48 hours, and I'm not really advocating like extended long-term fasting, but up to 48 hours, your metabolism's going up. So just that's kind of one of those things. And people say, oh, it makes you lose muscle, but actually fasting can increase your human growth hormone and actually can help you gain muscle. So just some little fun myths that I wanted to kind of dispel. Okay, next slide. I like this. This is an actual picture of a caveman chasing his next meal. So human beings, we actually evolved to be fasters. And kind of think about it, ancient hunter-gatherers did not have a supermarket to go stock up on food so that they regularly could eat their breakfast, lunch, and dinner and snacks. They had to go out and get their meals. And so they evolved to be able to go extended periods of time without food. This is why we have body fat. I used to think that, I had such a surplus of fat, and I still do, but I used to think of it as like, what a drag that I'm dragging all this fat around with me. But it's actually an evolutionary thing. It's there as stored energy. And so whenever you don't catch that rabbit, or you don't gather up those berries and you don't have anything, your body's got your ready refrigerator right there with whatever energy you need for as long as you need to go until you can catch the next rabbit. So I thought that was an interesting thing that I had never really considered before fasting. I thought I would bring that up. Okay, next slide. I wanted to kind of talk about, I wanted to break down the benefits of fasting into spiritual, physical, mental. And I wanted to start with spiritual because, this is a church service, and Unitarians do not have fasting as part of our religious tradition necessarily. However, fasting is part of virtually every major religion. In fact, right now is Ramadan for Muslims, and it's a full month they actually do dry fasting, so they have no food or drink from sunup to sundown every day for a month. So that's kind of a pretty well-known fasting tradition you may have heard of. You've got Christians have a number of different kinds of fast. There's Lent, that's kind of more of the abstinence fast, or you'll have like one meal, but you won't have any meat. So that's why we have fish fries, which are, even if you don't participate in Lent, it's always nice to have some good tasty fried fish. I learned that Eastern Orthodox Christians have fasting as a very important part of their spiritual discipline, that their fasting takes up quite a lot of the calendar year. They do a lot of fasting. I didn't know this. And their purpose of fasting is not to suffer, but to guard against gluttony and impure thoughts, deeds, and words. I learned that our friends, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or Mormons, have a fast Sunday, the first Sunday of every month, where you fast essentially for a 24-hour fast. And the money saved by not having to purchase and make those meals is donated to the church as an offering, which is then used to help people in need. And that's a common thing you'll find with fasting and religions. It's about kind of enhancing your own appreciation and relationship to the spiritual realm, but also to channel your bounty to others that are in need, that truly do need food and are not choosing to not have food, but just don't have it. In Judaism, Yom Kippur is considered the most important day of the Jewish year cycle. And on Yom Kippur, they do fasting as a means of repentance. So it's expected of every Jewish man and woman above the age of bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah. And it's the only fast day mentioned in the Torah. So Buddhist monks and nuns have kind of a form of intermittent fasting built into their daily ritual. They only eat in the morning, and afternoon they don't eat. So basically, they sort of have a limited eating window, and that's just part of their disciplined regimen that helps them with meditation and good health. Hindus do a lot of fasting. They kind of have different, depending on the cultures and the customs. But like, for example, devotees of Shiva, they fast on Mondays, and then Vishnu devotees will fast on Thursdays. So they have kind of different days of the week when they'll fast. So I thought that was kind of interesting, just to look at, and there's many more. I didn't want to list every single religion, but yeah, there's a lot of different fasting. It goes back just centuries and millennia. If you want to go to the next slide, I will talk about beyond religion, just in general, some of the spiritual benefits that I have discovered with fasting. So a couple years ago, I did a sermon with Jen Gillum. We talked about mindfulness and meditation. And that was a habit that I got really into and I started doing, and then I had to share it with the congregation. And I'm happy to say that I still do practice a daily meditation and mindfulness. And I have found that fasting, it's kind of like a physical form of mindfulness practice, because it really forces you to kind of clear out the noise of food and meals and eating and get down to a more simple kind of place. It's sort of like with meditation, where when you're meditating, thoughts kind of come up and you can decide how you want to respond to them. That's what hunger does. So you're sitting there right now I'm fasting, by the way. I have not eaten since last night at about 6:30 p.m. And I'm starting to feel a little bit hungry, like a little twinge of hunger, nothing crazy. But the thing is, with mindfulness, you're supposed to notice feelings before you react to them. And so that's really, fasting does that. It kind of forces you to go, I'm hungry. Well, what does that mean? Am I really hungry? And the hunger will pass, just like thoughts pass. Just they kind of come and go. Same with hunger. And so fasting is kind of a way to flex your mindfulness muscles in a physical kind of manifestation. Another spiritual benefit, and I think you'll see that this was common across some of the religious traditions I shared, is gratitude, particularly for food. You become very grateful for every meal that you eat, every morsel of food that you eat, because it becomes really precious. You're not grazing all day long where you're just like, mindlessly kind of shoving food in your mouth. And by the way, Dale picked a great song. The Junk Food Junkie song was great because that was me prior to this journey. I really was a junk food junkie, and I ate a lot of junk. And I tried to use junk, I guess, to kind of fill either boredom or soothe my feelings of sadness or stress or whatever. And fasting takes that ability away. You don't have that anymore. And so it's just really interesting. So you become really grateful for the food that you have. You just kind of feel grateful for like simpler things in life. And that comes up stronger. And I would also say that meals become a time of great joy. And I've always had a lot of joy around food. I've always loved food. I love to eat. But I mean, it's kind of like if you've ever gone backpacking or camping, but backpacking in particular, because you're kind of schlepping everything on your back and you're going into the woods and you've been going all day. And then, maybe you've had a couple things to eat, but you're just so freaking hungry and ready to eat by the time you set up your camp and you prepare your dinner. That food, even if it's just hot dogs and baked beans and whatever food, it tastes like the best food you've ever had in your life. That's kind of the way I feel when I sit down to eat any meal. I mean, I really do enjoy every bite. I appreciate it. I also am more choosy about what I eat because it's got to be worth it. And that's not just a weight loss thing. It's not just, it has to be good for my weight loss. It has to really, if I'm going to eat this food during my limited time that I'm allowing myself to eat, it better be good. And it has to be good for me, because if I stuff myself with junk food during that time, I end up feeling pretty terrible later on. Either I'll get heartburn or I don't know. I get hungry, because a lot of times if you eat junk food, it kind of makes you hungry. So it really brings a joy and appreciation to food and to just life in general. You just have a heightened sense of those things. Okay, next slide. Now we're going to get into the big, beefy physical benefits, of which there are many, of fasting. And no matter what kind of diet you have. The reason I chose this picture is I didn't have a before and after of my feet or my ankles. I guess I could take an after one now, but I didn't have a good before one. But this I thought was a good demonstration. So prior to my fasting, sorry, my feet were about a size and a half bigger than they are right now. My feet had just kind of gotten more swollen. They retained a lot of water. I was on medication to help me reduce that swelling, to kind of get rid of water. But my feet were really swollen. And by the end of every day, I had to put them up on a footstool or something to just kind of get any relief at all. It was just really uncomfortable to kind of walk and do normal life because my feet were getting so swollen. And literally after fasting for maybe a week or two, my feet got skinny. And I mean, really fast too. It wasn't like I dropped all these pounds. It was just like my feet were skinny. And I actually went down a size and a half. I had to get all different shoes, which was crazy. Like I've been that size pretty much since I had kids. And now I'm down to an 8.5, sometimes a 9. And my feet every time, they just feel so good. Like I could walk all day long. I could do all kinds of activity. It doesn't matter. I never have to put my feet up now. I mean, my feet just feel great. So this is just one tiny little example of the physical benefits of fasting. But there's a really good New England Journal of Medicine article that came out earlier this year that was kind of a meta analysis of many different studies all around intermittent fasting. And it talks about the benefits for a whole lot of chronic disorders, from obesity, obviously, diabetes, so helping to bring blood sugar down, improve insulin resistance, and in a lot of folks, they've been able to reverse diabetes. without medication. They've actually gone off medications because they no longer have the metabolic state that causes them to need the insulin. It's had a lot of benefits for cardiovascular disease, cancer, and neurodegenerative brain diseases. So there are, and this is, again, the New England Journal of Medicine. So this is not kooky, way out there kind of theorists. They're actually there's real science behind it. There have been studies that show that, I mentioned this earlier about how you actually can improve muscle mass while fasting. It actually helps you. And there was a study where people who fasted daily for 16 hours lost fat while maintaining or increasing their muscle mass. Because if you think about it, if fat is stored energy on your body, intermittent fasting allows you to tap into that stored fat. And that really helped me understand, oh, okay, so I've got all this extra energy that I carry around with me from place to place. The only way that my body is going to be able to use that is if I give it some time for it to switch over to burning that fat rather than burning whatever the glucose is from the meal that I just ate. And so that's why fasting has a lot of benefits for weight loss. Another one that this really surprised me was increased energy. I think most of us usually think of, oh, if you're not eating, then you don't have energy. You're going to be low energy. You got to eat something to keep your energy up. That's like the whole Snickers marketing campaign, right? But actually, I have found, and I've heard this from a lot of people who do fasting, that my energy is higher when I am fasting. After I eat, especially if I eat a big meal, I kind of start to feel sluggish. And you felt that. I'm sure you've had food comas and you've kind of had the afternoon slump after you eat lunch or whatever, because your body takes a lot of energy to digest your food. So every time you eat, your body's like, okay, I got to digest this food. And so it kind of like slows you down because you're now into that digestion mode. So when your body's like all done with digesting, then suddenly you have tons of energy. And so I find that when I am fasting, I get a lot done. I really get a lot done. I'm like, boy, I'm ready to go. Let's go. In fact, if I do any kind of extended fasting, more than like a 16 or 18 hour, if I go beyond like 24 hours, I have trouble going to sleep sometimes because I've got so much energy. I'm just like, I gotta meditate to bring my brain down because I just want to go. So I thought that was kind of an interesting benefit that I didn't really know about. So I mentioned about cardiovascular improvements. So there are studies that have multiple indicators of cardiovascular health improve with fasting, and that includes blood pressure. And I found that to be the case. In fact, I've had hypertension since I was diagnosed, I think, when I was 22. We have it runs in our family. And I was up to like 2 meds. I think I was on 2 different meds for high blood pressure. And after fasting for, I don't know, maybe a month or 2, I started noticing like I was starting to feel kind of dizzy when I would do yoga and stuff. And it was because my blood pressure was going down so much that I didn't need all those meds. So I was able to go off of one of the meds, and I'm still on the other one. So I think I'm not sure that I've completely reversed all hypertension, but I was able to cut back because my blood pressure went down, and that's a common thing. Also, cholesterol improves. I found that to be the case because I had mine tested before I started fasting, and then I've tested it a couple times since, and my cholesterol has improved. There are studies that show that fasting can help with both tumor growth, so slowing the growth of cancerous tumors, and there are some studies that show that by fasting prior to a clinical treatment for cancer, it actually improves the outcome of the treatment. So there's a lot of metabolic reasons for that, and I'm not going to get into the science of it, but just something interesting worth noting. This is a big, dementia prevention is a big one that I have harped to my parents, who I believe are both on this Zoom right now. And this is why I was pitching fasting hard to them. Not that they have any dementia, but they have a fear of developing it. And as we all do, right? And intermittent fasting has been shown to enhance cognition, including spatial memory, associative memory, and working memory. There's a lot behind that, but essentially when your body is tapping into your stored fat, and so it's not using the energy that's in you from the food you just ate, when it's, okay, we got to switch to the body fat time, it releases these things called ketones. You may have heard of ketosis. But ketones do really great things for your brain. They make your brain work a lot better, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But the other thing that happens is something called autophagy. And autophagy, let me give you the definition. It comes from the Greek word auto, which means self, and phagy, which means to eat. So it's literally you're eating yourself is what it means. But it's the body's way of getting rid of old broken down cells and then recycling them and bringing new ones. And so that's what's happening in your brain. It's like clearing out your brain and helps with keeping your brain sharp. So that's pretty cool. So that's kind of, I would say, the rundown of the physical benefits. I'm going to go to the next slide. I'll talk a little bit more about mental benefits. This is an actual photo of how my brain looks when I am fasting. It's like a starburst of energy is coming out of my head. It's really amazing. I have told people I've never taken speed, but I have taken ADHD medication, which is kind of speed in the past. And it's kind of like that. It's like it clears away all the excess distraction and it allows your brain to really like focus in on what your task is, what you're trying to accomplish. And again, this is because your body releases these ketones, which make your brain just go into hyper focus. And I learned one thing, the reason for that is, think back to the picture that I showed earlier about the caveman. If the caveman is trying to find his dinner and he's gone a long time without eating, he needs his brain to be working well in order for him to hunt and gather smartly. And so that's kind of what's happening. Your brain is actually kicking it up a notch because that's evolutionary to make you want to go and find something to eat and to be able to get it. So that's one of the mental benefits. I would say also just it reduces your mental load. When you don't have to worry so much about every meal and every snack that I used to have, I have a lot of more freedom. I've noticed, like when I go on a trip, for example, and it's been a little while, but if I go like fly somewhere for work, I don't have to worry about, oh, well, I got to make sure I get breakfast at the airport. And then I have to make sure I get a snack on the airplane. And where am I going to eat when I get there? It's like, I could just fast. It's fine. And that it clears away any kind of worry about what I need to do and when. It also provides a sense of control. And I think that this is for anybody that uses food in kind of a maladaptive way. So if you're using food as a coping mechanism, it takes that away. You're not able to do that. And so you have to find other ways to deal with your mental health issues. So I found that, I had previously several years ago given up drinking alcohol. And when I stopped doing that, I was like, oh, gee, now I got to like figure out some other ways to deal with problems when I'm feeling down. And so food actually is a nice kind of supplement for that. So if you don't have that, then you got to really, that's when I really amped up my meditation, my exercise. I looked for other kind of healthier ways to cope with things. And so fasting allows you to do that. Let me go to the next slide. This is just I don't want to be a complete like crazy person and tell you that fasting is the most perfect and wonderful thing that ever existed. There are some cons. First of all, I just want to mention that fasting is not for everyone. So if you're underweight, if you have an eating disorder like anorexia, if you're pregnant, women who are pregnant or breastfeeding, and children it's not recommended that they fast. So I don't want to suggest that it is for everyone. So that's kind of, it's just something to consider. I would say my biggest con of fasting is hanger. It's real. I get it. Uh, it does improve over time as what they say that, fasting is like a muscle and you have to kind of grow it and strengthen it over time. And I definitely have seen that as I've strengthened my fasting muscle, I'm not as hangry when I'm fasting, but there are times, particularly if I'm fasting for up to like 40 plus hours, where, my patience is just really running thin and mama needs to eat. And sometimes I'll just say like, guys, I got to eat. Like I got to eat before I can deal with this. And so that's what the t-shirt, sorry, is what I said when I was fasting. So that's one of the cons. And I know I've heard from other folks that they don't get that way as much. I think it depends on, your own personal situation. And then there's another little con would be sometimes it's awkward in social situations. Like if you go to a party where everybody's eating and you're not eating and they say, oh, you should try this or that. And you kind of have to be like, oh, I'm fasting, or you have to figure out what to say, because eating is definitely ingrained into so much of our social world. Like everything we do involves food and eating. And so you kind of have to get good at either explaining why you're not eating or planning your fasting around special events when you would be eating. And if you want to go to the next slide, there are some practical pros that I'll mention quickly beyond the spiritual, mental, and physical. You save money because you're not eating as much. You don't buy as much food, and that's pretty awesome. I tried to do some calculations when I was going to the office, and I've been working from home for the past 6 weeks or so. But prior to that, I would eat out, almost every day for lunch. But when I was fasting and I would like skip lunch, I realized I'm saving like $50 a week or $30 a week or whatever. So it adds up. I mentioned, you have more time in your day if you're not preparing, planning, eating, cleaning up after meals. So that kind of gives you more time to just do whatever you want to do. And it's flexible. So you can flex it. And I promise I will save some time for discussion. I'm almost done. That last slide, next slide, go one more time. This is my little cartoon joke. Try fasting between meals to ease in, and go one more time. This is kind of a chart that shows you different types of intermittent fasting to try. I would say the easiest one to start with is kind of a daily time restricted eating approach, where you're basically saying, I'm only going to eat for noon to 6 o'clock in PM, something like that. That still gives you a lot of benefits. There's alternate day fasting, where you'll eat for a 24-hour period and then give yourself 24 hours off. You'll take 2 days a week when you fast. That's another method. Periodic fasting. There's a lot of different ways to do it. It's very flexible. And I've done a lot of different kinds. It just depends on what your goals are and your comfort level and kind of your life situation. Right now, I will say I have only been doing time restricted eating. I've been doing like a 16-hour fast a day because it's really stressful to be in this time. And I find that when I'm really stressed out, it's hard to fast. Go to the next slide. I think this is my last one. This is just some resources that I recommend if you're wanting to learn more about fasting and low carb in some cases. They're not all low carb advocates, but the book Fast, Feast, Repeat is coming out soon, so you can pre-order that. But I've read several other books by that author, Jim Stevenson. She's awesome. She's really, really practical and good. Okay, so that's my spiel on fasting. I want to give time for discussion. So I will turn it back to you.
I appreciate all the time. What I didn't do was real quickly, I'm going to copy and paste these into the discussion. And Paul, you can send us out into our groups here if I can do this quick enough.
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll wait for you to copy them there. I'll just remind everybody, we had some folks last time when we went to discussion group that they thought it was over and they didn't wait a few seconds. You will reappear